specifically on the work we're doing to help recruit foreign-born talent to the state. So I always like to give a little landscape of the workforce situation in the state with every presentation that I do, just to kind of set the tone so you understand what we're working with. As you likely know, historically, North Dakota has had a low unemployment rate for the last several years. We are typically among the lowest, if not the lowest, for unemployment in the nation. We also typically have among the highest labor participation rates in the country. And so essentially almost everyone who can work is working, which is tremendous, but that means that we need to recruit from outside of the state to help fill our vacancies. Right now we have just over 12,000 jobs posted. You'll hear estimates that it might be closer to 30,000. Personally, I don't think it's quite that high. We're seeing tremendous growth in our workforce, which I'll talk about in just a second. And so I do believe that the total number is likely more than that 12,000. There are a lot of companies who might post a position one time, but they're hiring multiple. We see this a lot in nursing or healthcare in general. You know, they'll post a one nursing position, but they would hire 50. We see it a lot with CDL drivers, IT professionals, and so we anticipate that that number is likely higher. Like I said, I'm not quite sure it's at that 30,000 that you'll hear us talk about. We need to dig into those numbers a little bit. Right now, we have 411,000 plus in the workforce. In Ward County, we've got 31,692. So we're seeing really good workforce participation in the Ward County area as well. One thing I want to share is that our total employment at the end of 2023 was 421,639. So we're up about 10,000 workers since the end of last year. Our total employment has grown by more than 2% each of the last 2 years, and we're on track to hit that mark again this year. And I know 2% doesn't necessarily sound huge, but keep in mind that a 1% increase in our workforce is 4,000 workers. 1% is 4,000 workers. And so we really do have a more than doubling that goal the last almost 3 years now. So we are seeing great growth within our workforce, and I'm really proud of the work that our workforce system, in collaboration with local partners like, you know, the Minot Chamber EDC, and I'll talk about the work that we're doing with them here in just a little bit. I will skip over most of the slides I have related to the Workforce Development Council, just so we can focus more on the programs that we're implementing. But I will highlight that the Workforce Development Council is really designed to advise the Governor and public concerning the nature and extent of workforce needs in the state. Governor Burgum has done a nice job of elevating our board as the owner of the state's workforce strategy. And throughout this current administration, we've seen a lot of success. So the programs that Jana and I are going to highlight have either been recommended by the council or endorsed by our board. I'd also like to share that Mayor Ross is one of the more recent members to be appointed to the Workforce Development Council. So we've got some extra Minot representation on the board now. All right, so moving into some of the programs that we have. First is the Regional Workforce Impact Program, which we started in 2022 utilizing funding under the American Rescue Plan Act. And this program is really designed to answer the question, hey, we've got a really great idea. Do you have funding to support these efforts? And for a long time, we didn't have resources or a mechanism to help fuel locally led workforce solutions. Now, thanks to the Regional Workforce Impact Program, or RWIP, we have been able to successfully fund 107 projects statewide. We've broken this into a regional funding model so that each of the 8 planning regions in the state has a piece of the pie. We wanted to make sure that communities large and small all had access, and Minot has been a really great leader in bringing people together to help identify regional solutions that can be implemented throughout Region 2. And so one of the really interesting learnings that we had through this program was, of course, we knew childcare was a huge need statewide. We did not anticipate that this would emerge as the top use for funding throughout this program. And so far, we have funded 54 childcare projects statewide, creating more than 2,300 new childcare slots, which is tremendous. Right now, a lot of these projects are still under construction, so I don't know that exactly how many of these slots have been filled. Naturally, the ability to meet the new capacity that's been created hinges on workforce and the center's ability to staff the vacancies that they have to meet that capacity. Within Region 2, we have supported 16 projects with more than $3.3 million. 7 of those projects are childcare projects, creating more than 370 childcare slots. And so I know that if I can call out names, but the Chamber EDC, particularly Mark, has been such a key partner for us in implementing this program throughout the region. So we're really grateful for their leadership on that.
So Katie, if I could, before we
Yes.
move on from that, can you talk about what those projects actually are? Then? What do they look like? Is it funding a building? Is it funding training? What are we actually doing with the funds?
Gosh, well, I think Wayfinders has been part of that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Oh, Martina, go ahead.
Yeah, that's the main one because that's where we're spending a bulk of it right now, especially.
Do you want Mark to answer that?
Yeah,
Just
wherever you
to-
like. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
Because-
with childcare specifically, so there's 2 tranches of funding. One was in 2022, and that had maybe a little bit more flexibility potentially. And with that, we had over $600 or near $600,000 of childcare, and that was mostly infrastructure. So that was, hey, I've got a good center, but if I just built on, this wing, or if I took out this wall and did these 6 things, I could add another 20 slots or another 40 slots. And so a lot of it was existing buildings that needed some room to grow, and good infrastructure was there in place, and they just built out.
Okay. And so were the grants? Was it loan buy downs? What was
That's
it?
a matching grant. So that was a 25%
25%.
is what the
yes.
business had to bring. So again, on a $100,000 project, they'd have to bring 25K, and they would open up an access to 75,000. We ran that as an RFP. So we put a request out to all the childcare businesses that we could identify, and that was through Amy Jenkins and Childcare Aware and a lot of folks here in town. And then we had a team that scored it. It was including Service Basin Planning Council. We tried to give everyone some money, but we really went after childcare slots.
Are those just centers then, or
No,
home daycares?
they couldn't do in-home daycare because then you don't have control over that. What person does with their home. I closed my business 6 months later. Well, now we just improve someone's home.
Yep.
So it couldn't be an in-home daycare that way, but it could be. We helped folks outside of town and inside of town. So again, Region 2 covers 7 counties. That's the same region that Service Basin Planning Council serves, and that's how we approached that very first grant as a region. The second tranche of funding was 2023,
Yes. Yeah.
and then that was the child care facilities had to apply directly.
Yes.
So they didn't go through our office or a central location to do it. And then we still saw a lot of child care people say we need to have that money. So they went after it themselves.
Mr. Chair, what are the strings attached to those dollars? What are the
Really
deliverables?
Katie can talk to those more directly, but really the biggest thing was the match, and then you proved to us you've done what you said you're going to do.
Yeah, I just exactly what Mark said. As far as reporting goes, we require reporting whenever a grant recipient is requesting funds. We want to know what they've done with the funding that they received previously. And the way we structure this is different than most of our grants. Typically, a lot of our grants through our division within Commerce are cost reimbursement, but we know that these projects are pretty big and not everyone has that funding up front. And so they're relying on the grant to actually implement this work. And so they're getting a portion of the funding upon signature of the agreement. They get another portion once they've hit the first milestone that they've identified. We do require them to lay out the goals that they have for the project. And then they get the rest of the funding once they complete the project, or once they get closer to completing the project. And so we try not to make too much of the administration to be too burdensome, because we know that a lot of the folks that are receiving these funds are new to grants. And managing a grant can be very overwhelming. So we're trying to meet our needs while also accommodating the needs of our grant recipients.
Yeah. Maybe just one addition. That first round of grant, as Mark talked about, they were handled kind of 2 different ways. The first round was like 1.8 million, I believe, was the total. And with that, that was the portion that went to childcare. But there were also some key signature projects, the Minot Workforce Academy, the Minot Area Workforce Academy. We supported some additional training equipment to help to fill a gap that was needed to complete that project. The other bigger one is the Trinity facility downtown, Trinity Dakota College of Bodno. We used our dollars to help as far as with that, and obviously that's a workforce focused effort. But that initial 1.8 million, the Minot Area Chamber EDC actually facilitated the full grant. And so we did a lot of outreach to the full area and then identified from a ranking system, how do we serve childcare needs, workforce, and those kind of larger efforts, and then work directly with our partners at Commerce to execute that. And then in the second round, we played more of a facilitator role to where we helped to reach out to community partners because the grants were directly with the Department of Commerce. And so the criteria was a little different, but as Katie had mentioned, the dollars that we put there, as you guys are probably familiar with, the Wayfinder program, which is our magicatminot.com, that welcoming kind of ambassadors, bringing workforce in. It's really the next level, and I'm sure you're going to talk about Find the Good Life, but it's really the next level to the state's effort of workforce and talent attraction. We put in a grant specifically to the Minot Area Chamber EDC. So in the second round, we were actually a recipient of some of the funds, but it supported the state effort. So there's a lot of collaboration with these type of programs. And with them too, we've helped to collaborate. How do we best serve the regions based on what we've learned from the first funding mechanism, if that's fair, Katie?
Yep, absolutely.
Paul, did you have something?
Just once the grant closes out, it's done with, there's no term of the grant,
Like clawback and.
clawback,
that kind of
10
stuff?
years, you need to be in business as a daycare facility.
We don't have that built into our contracts right now.
Okay, Tyler?
One quick question was, did the city of Minot match any of those dollars for that initial 25%? None of that all came from the state, correct?
Well, the 25%
25 came
match
from
came from the business
individual,
or
correct?
the entity that was running that facility. So for example, Minot Area Workforce Academy is a Minot Public School endeavor. The businesses identified that CDLs is where we're short, so the CDL simulators is what we put the money after, and Minot Area Workforce, by means of Minot Public Schools, put up the 25% or showed that they had done the equivalent work to get those two simulators.
Got it.
And are these typically, have they been established businesses? Are there startups that are getting grants?
So, Mr. Chairman, the only private business that's eligible for funding under this program is childcare. Otherwise, the other entities that are able to apply are chambers and EDCs, regional councils. We're really focused on those community-based organizations that are not striving for a single business solution, but are trying to create workforce solutions for the collective area or community that they're serving. So to answer your question, yes, there were some new childcare facilities that received funding, and then there were also some existing facilities that were either looking to relocate to a larger space or expand the space that they were already in.
Of those childcare centers that use that grant, are they all still in business?
Yes.
And then with the dollars that are coming in through the chambers, is that all passed through completely? Or do you guys need some of it for administration, or are the dollars going through?
We did, everything went straight through.
Okay.
We didn't take anything for administration.
The 1.8 million that was the first round, people who wrote it weren't necessarily people who got any funding.
There was no administration for it or anything else, and even the time and effort into that was just part of our work. We didn't take anything from it.
Perfect. Okay, Justin?
And I'm not sure who's best to answer this question, but for the childcare projects, we're saying that 373 slots were open. Is there any way to tie that to that put 100 more people back into the workforce because they now have childcare, or is there any way to tie that?
So once those slots are actually filled, we will be able to report on, how many working parents or caregivers are linked to the children that are filling the spots. Because these are still under construction, we don't have all the information yet on exactly how many slots have been filled. But yes, that is part of our reporting. Granted, it's kind of a snapshot of a moment in time because, someone could start within a childcare space and then decide to withdraw their child, they're gonna stay home or move them, or it's a little variable, but we can get a decent ballpark once those slots are filled.
It could have been someone moving from a home facility to one of these facilities.
Exactly.
And it could be one parent with multiple children,
Mm-hmm.
or one family that has
Sure.
multiple children.
Good questions. Keep going?
Yep.
All right, thank you so much. Moving on to what we are doing to attract talent to the state. The Department of Commerce launched Find the Good Life, which is a national talent attraction initiative that's pairing targeted marketing with a relocation help desk that connects job seekers and employers with communities. And it also ties in really nicely with the Wayfinders program that the city of Minot and Chamber EDC have been implementing. And so we see a lot of synergy with this program and local efforts, particularly in this community. And so Minot certainly has been a leader in leveraging this program and then extending it throughout the community in a way that we'd love to see more communities start doing. And actually the first mover that we were able to support in making their way to North Dakota is living and working in Minot. So he became a bit of a local celebrity once he got to the state. But currently we have 4,200 job seekers in our pipeline. These are folks that have voluntarily given us a little information about themselves, name, where they're coming from, the type of job they're interested in or industry where they have experience, what they look for in a community, what kind of quality of life do they seek, what are the activities that are important to them outside of work, so that we can help identify a community that meets their needs. 81% of our job seekers have never been to the state, they've never visited, they haven't lived here, and so there's a lot of education that we need to provide, not only through our relocation help desk, but through our marketing efforts as well. Currently, we know that 43 individuals have relocated. Now, it's really important to note, these are the 43 people who have utilized the concierge service. We're serving a lot more than that throughout the state right now. It takes time to make a move. There are a lot of variables that influence someone's ability to move. Available housing, childcare, affording the cost of moving across the country, moving across the state. Some of those fees can be out of reach for some job seekers. We know that desire is high. We have, let me double check here, we have 61% of our job seekers say they want to move within the next 6 months. 30% of those folks want to move now. Realistically, it's going to take a little longer to actually make that move. The other challenge that we're now experiencing is that employers are a little hesitant when it comes to out-of-state job seekers. Is this person from Nevada really serious about North Dakota? What we hear from that person in Nevada is yes, they are serious about North Dakota. And so there's some education that we need to do on the employer side to help them understand that these are really serious candidates and they're interested in the communities and the careers that they have, that we have available here in North Dakota. And so those are some of the things that we're working through right now. We have a community champion program affiliated with this campaign where we're connecting individuals if they want. Not everybody wants that concierge service. They're a little more independent. That's totally fine. But some are looking for, hey, I want to talk to someone in Minot, help answer some questions that I have about the community, help get me connected with some employers. And so that's where the community champions and Wayfinders in Minot come into play. Let us help you explore the community. Once you're here, let's help you get integrated, because that community connection is really the key to retaining the individuals that we're recruiting. One thing I want to highlight is that, of course, I mentioned the variables that really factor into somebody actually making a move. So it's really important to keep in mind that we don't base success of this campaign solely on the metrics that were on the previous slide. We also look at total employment, which, as you may remember from the beginning of my presentation, is increasing at a really encouraging rate. But we also look to a statistic like this from the US Census Bureau that tells us North Dakota ranks #1 in the nation for net migration, which is tremendous. People are really interested in coming to North Dakota, and they're making their way here whether we're helping them or not through our concierge service. And so we really have to look at our talent attraction efforts holistically, pairing together not just the marketing, not just the concierge service and the other programmatic work that we're building for employers, but they work together. The last thing I'll highlight before turning it over to Jana to kind of go over really briefly our Office of Legal Immigration is the Candidate Marketplace, which is free and available to all employers to utilize to connect with our national pool of job seekers. So I'll pause here, just, two more really briefly. Operation Intern is a program that provides up to $4,000 in wage match for employers that are hiring and employing interns. They can have up to 5 interns supported through this program. And then our technical skills training grant is designed to support accelerated upskilling or reskilling of workers. Both private businesses and training providers like a college or university could utilize this program. So now I'll pause there just briefly. If any questions on these programs that I've covered, if not, I will pass it over to Jana.
One of the last comments you made was look at our talent attraction efforts holistically. What does that mean?
So that means looking at, we have the marketing side where we are really working to tell our story. What we have found, and Heather can talk to this a little more too, is that when we've done some national polling, we've learned that awareness about North Dakota is pretty low. And it's really hard to attract someone to live in a place that they don't know much about. And so our marketing efforts are both educational to help people learn about North Dakota, and there's that persuasive marketing. Hey, this is why you should live here. This is why you should work here. These are the opportunities we have. So that's a piece of that holistic approach. The other piece of that is that relocation help desk, the candidate marketplace, some of the work that our workforce team is doing to help. All right, we've got people who are engaging. Let's really help draw them in and connect them with communities, connect them with with employers, so that they can actually get hired and then make their way to North Dakota. We're also working to build some additional grant programs to possibly help with that relocation side that would actually funnel through the employer. We know that some businesses are already working to incentivize or support an out-of-state job seekers move to North Dakota. That's not accessible for all businesses, and so we're working to figure out how we can help meet them halfway and actually getting people to the state. So those are a few of the things that we're working on, but when I talk about holistic, it's both the marketing and the programmatic approach that have to work together.
Sure. So when we talk about like quality of life, is that something that you guys poll on? Like, what are people looking for? Are they looking for, what the sales tax for parks that we're talking about, like investments into those that the communities are making? What kind of things are people looking for? Like, for age groups, right? I mean, are they looking for a college life? Are they looking for, parks, dining, recreation? What kind of polling do you guys see in that, or do you guys poll that?
So we do. We ask all of that. We want to understand what are job seekers looking for in a community. Trends that we see, outdoor recreation is really popular. We have an abundance of that in North Dakota. We see arts and entertainment, which can really be tied into a variety of things in a community. Some communities offer that a little more than others, and so that helps us narrow the search. They're looking for good schools. If you're moving with a family, you want a great school system. I think those are
Safety.
tough.
Like
Safety,
one of the top
of
comments
course.
is safety and the ability to own a home.
Yeah, if I may.
Yeah.
We work with a company called DCI, and they do a national survey every year called Talent Wars. And through that, we're able to, because we also work individually as the state of North Dakota with DCI, we're able to dig in a little bit even to our region. And so, one of the questions they ask is, why do people move? What are the motivators to relocating? And that quality of life that always rises to the top is a very vague statement. What does quality of life mean for different people? So they've dug into that as well. We'd be happy to share the studies. It is very interesting, and it's national, so you take that with a grain of salt as well. But like safety, security, amenities, all of those things are really top of that quality of life.
Yeah, and I think that would be good for us to see. So if you are able to share that, I think that'd be good, because I think, one of the things, Paul, is as we're sitting on council, my mind is always sort of split between, well, yeah, that's cool, quality of life things are great, but that's not really our role. But our role is safety, and our role is, making sure that the infrastructure of the city is kept up and all the pieces that go with that. We have partners, whether it's the park board or others, that are focused more on quality of life items. That's the way I think of them. A little bit separate question. So, you had some of the numbers, Katie, and you look at, you look at the boom that occurred in Minot and really Western North Dakota, over the last 20 years, usually driven by markets, right? I mean, we look at, oh, great, that 43 people came in. That's awesome. We had 20,000 move to Minot, right? So there's the driver from the market is always the key piece. But where I see this really interesting is, are there certain roles that you guys are focused on with a program like that? Is it you know, is it healthcare? I mean, I think the entire state could use nurses everywhere, right? Or is it, are there certain, I guess, categories that you guys are focused on with programs like that where you're trying to get people to move here?
Yes, so Mr. Chairman, we are seeing, actually interestingly enough, with the leads that are coming into our pipeline, we're seeing a lot of similarity with their industry experience with our top needs. Healthcare is a huge one. We see education, sales and management. And I know Jana works a little more closely with that pipeline and can speak more directly to it, but we are working now with our marketing team to develop more industry specific strategies. We still have been in building mode with this program, so we're working to get our feet under us and figure out what that national marketing looks like. And now that we've figured that out, we're starting to figure out, okay, what are the industries that we should be focusing on, and where are the most appropriate markets for us to drill into healthcare or energy. Manufacturing is another really big one. And so these are part of the strategy that we are building and continuing through the next biennium.
All right, anything else? Okay, you guys continue.
All right, thank you. I will turn it over to Jana to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing through our new Office of Legal Immigration.
Just blind if I glare, that's okay, thank you. I'll start by saying that immigration, we could talk for hours about this, so I will skim through some things that we can provide as in an email for future use and to look back at. Our office is a year and a half old, officially started August of 2023. We've established our objectives. They were kind of established by the bill themselves, and we've been building out from that. But our leading roles are developing and implementing a statewide strategy around global talent retention and recruitment, which falls into very heavily our talent attraction strategy overall. We do provide recommendations to the governor's office and to the legislative assembly. And what I find really important is when we work with the other state agencies that either provide resources or services or are directly responsible for immigrant populations, like the Department of Health and Human Services. So those partnerships are really vital to when we're talking about relocating internationally born individuals to North Dakota. We also are implementing a pilot grant program that's live right now, and that is meant to support employers and businesses that are hiring or recruiting foreign-born talent, either increasing the number or maybe entering this for the very first time. It's really cumbersome to get started, and so it's really important to have that funding available. Kind of like what Katie said, when it comes to relocation, there's some businesses that can do it well and some that need that extra help. And the same is the case when we're talking about what businesses need when they're employing people who may speak a different language or practice different cultural customs. And so there is funding to support those businesses in integrative strategies, as well as community level funding for community-based organizations that serve those individuals. We found during our study that a lot of nonprofits do exist. There's actually a lot of entities in North Dakota working with new Americans or immigrants, and it's more the ability for them to market themselves as being available to provide services for employers or to help communities with integration. So we are supporting 6 nonprofits right now through that grant program in developing their websites, increasing their resource availability so that they can really maximize their utilization. And also 2 different funding streams, or tracks I should say, for communities themselves. There is one for community activities that are meant to be integrative, like the HUSFEST is like a very large idea of like a cultural activity. So this funding is really meant for more smaller scale types of integrative activities within the community itself, and then also for communities to conduct a assessment and develop an integration plan for new Americans and immigrants, which is going to become increasingly more important as different visa types get proposed at the federal level, where community integration plans will be required in order to be considered for those visas. So that's our leading goal. The next part, this I think is probably the most important when looking at what our office is currently doing. Paige, who is the Global Talent Coordinator for the office, and I have met with multiple organizations, and through the study that some people in this room actually participated in, and thank you, we did identify the key areas where there's opportunities and individuals inside of the United States already that we can capitalize on faster. And they're really looking for the same things as the Find the Good Life talent pool. They're looking for a place where they can move to that is going to provide them a better quality of life or the ability to work at the top of their scope. A lot of people are working well below their international training or credentials, and they see North Dakota as a place where they could use their training and use their education more fully. So we do have our international workers pipelines, and that's traditional visa-based immigration for workforce. But the three that are the most readily available and align really well with the needs in North Dakota are secondary migrants, and that can be refugees, asylum, granted asylum seekers, or individuals with temporary protected status. An example would be the Afghanis that helped with the United States government activities that are in the United States now. They are looking at moving somewhere, again, where their credentials or training can be used better or where they feel like they would have a better quality of life. Recent arrivals to the United States, that's that same group, but we're working very specifically with some agencies in other states that have already gone through the legal processes for them. So now they're at the phase where they have their work authorization and a legal status, and they need a place they can live and work. And then our highest skilled level is with our international students. International students in North Dakota, we have about 2,000 every year. These are students that are usually highly educated from their home countries, and now they're in North Dakota. MSU actually has a really great population, and they're pursuing degrees. A lot of them are in STEM fields. They are highly skilled. These are people that can fill those higher level positions like engineers, mechanical technicians. We're trying to figure out if they can work in UAS and security areas because they aren't citizens. So there are challenges there, but we are looking at that. We hosted a webinar yesterday for employers to learn a little bit more about the opportunities in North Dakota with those students and how to go about employing them. They're actually probably the easiest to employ out of all of these categories because they file their own paperwork, which is probably the most difficult part. This is something that I will email. We have this table, and it's something that Paige and I use because there are over 400 visa pathways for the United States. It is next to impossible to memorize all of them and who qualifies. But these particular ones are the ones that align the most with the job openings and industries in North Dakota. So these are where we have our most opportunity. And this is also the group of visas where we're identifying strategies that allow North Dakota employers to expedite entry and to capitalize on CAP exemptions and other things that make the employability a lot easier. This is the same thing, it's just for individuals whose status may or may not be permanent. And our current activities, I am really excited to say we've been, when it comes to healthcare, we've had a lot of engagement, which is not surprising. But we are working with Australia. We were able to create a relationship directly with the Australian government and their education institutions for nursing. We have a CAP exemption for the visa, and they are trained to the same requirements as U.S. nurses, so they don't require additional credentialing or training. They can immigrate to the United States and work as nurses pretty much immediately. They also don't have to take the English language proficiency exam, which gives them about 4 months more time working as far as a lead time. And then for our energy sector, that was the one we first started working with the most. But we are working specifically with USAID, which is another government to government project. And USAID will actually allow us to access people from CAP exempt countries, and we can work with their government to develop the training they need to do there before they even come here. And that's a really important part. The training has been one of the biggest barriers because it uses a good chunk of their visa time or their seasonal time. And so if we can have them trained there, then the whole time they're in North Dakota, they can work. And this is really important in manufacturing and agriculture, especially when we're talking about heavy machinery or different types of tractors and things like that. I would say one of the things to look out for is that we're going to continue to provide education in person or using webinars on the emerging either pipelines, opportunities, changes that may be coming that either increase our access or even making awareness if there's things that are shifting that would be less likely to focus on in the future. But we do want to make sure that we're equipping employers and communities with the most up-to-date information and with some practical programs and services that they can access to meet their workforce needs right away. I already spoke about our grant program, so I won't go through that one again, but we are up to 4 tracks in that. Like I said, 1 for employers, 1 for nonprofits, and 2 for communities. And then if you visit our website, in addition to seeing these 3 boxes around the middle of it, you will see the recorded webinars. Every training that we have done is recorded and posted there. The grant program is also accessible there. And then under these 3 tabs, community support, recruitment and staffing, and then legal services, there is a list and link to agencies and service providers that we have personally vetted and met with. We met with them to discuss their affordability for services, because we know legal services can be a really big barrier for employers, and also their capacity, because North Dakota, especially in the legal services area, we do not have a lot of legal service providers who focus on immigration law. And so we do have contracts with Minnesota with 2 different law firms in Minnesota that provide services for North Dakota specifically. And so that is where you can go to find all of those resources. And for businesses, anytime you have people that are having challenges, in addition to reaching out to our Find the Good Life program, where it is appropriate, the Office of Legal Immigration can also be a resource. And we do work very closely with Sarah, who manages the Find the Good Life program, so that we can figure out which pipeline is the one that's going to meet that employer's need, and then work from there. So we're here for you, and I can share our good news. Okay. We did find out, just to prove how closely we're working together with our national and global talent, we have that secondary migration pipeline that we've been working with. And last month we met with an entity named Cherokee Federal, who is working with New York and providing case management. And we will be successfully employing 3 families in Harvey at the long-term care facility there. And New York is actually going to be paying for their relocation in 2 weeks to North Dakota, to Harvey, North Dakota, of all places. Excited. And that was a really fast turnaround. It's been 4 weeks from the initiation to those job offers being made. And that's a partnership that we looked at specifically because New York is willing to pay some of that relocation, which is especially helpful for nonprofits or smaller businesses.
I'd like to add one thing, Jenna. Jenna did a great job providing an overview of the work that she and Paige and our team have done. She speaks about it so eloquently that it's easy to gloss over how incredible this is. I want to highlight that our Office of Legal Immigration has been nationally recognized a number of times for the unique focus we are taking on workforce. There are 19 other states who have somewhat similar offices. They're Office of New Americans, and they're typically focused on humanitarian services, whereas our office is laser focused on workforce and helping individuals and companies connect for the betterment of our economy and the workforce. And so we're really excited and very proud of the approach we've taken, the success that we've seen. And I also want to share that everyone that we are serving, all of these workers are work authorized. They have already gone through or are in the process of going through appropriate pathways or programs to be able to work in the United States. And we are really capitalizing on these opportunities to help individuals get connected with North Dakota employers. And so what we're doing is very different than what other states are doing. We're innovative, we're thinking outside of the box, and fortunately we're working with businesses and communities that are excited to come alongside us. And so North Dakota's on the cutting edge with this one, so I always just want to point that out. Thank you.
Okay, questions? Tyler?
Mr. Chairman, was the Department of Commerce involved with the Bach and Grow that came out from North Dakota Petroleum Council? What's the status of that? And I know Minot took part. What's the status of Minot's?
Do you want me to take it, or?
Jen.
That program started shortly before our office technically was in place, So we had awareness of it and we did meet with the Petroleum Council and Brent Sanford to learn about kind of the process that they were planning. There was a lot of emphasis on Ukrainian parolees as an opportunity for North Dakota. And so we were connected to it, and we did help provide some resources for the Petroleum Council to use as far as letting them know what types of Office of Refugee Resettlement Service programs those individuals were eligible for that could help with relocation or help with integration, but we didn't directly work together. They brought 60 people over through that program. Those 60 people, as far as this morning, so we just met with Brent this morning, all still live in North Dakota, or they're still on their parolee status. Parolee status is something that will be in the air under the new administration, but at this time they do still have their parolee status, and they are all working. Some of them have gone on to sponsor their own family members to come over, which is part of the Ukrainian program specifically. So that is the update there.
Okay, Rebecca, something to add?
Yeah, I can add a little bit more as far as to it. So with that, as Jenna had mentioned, that was started by the North Dakota Petroleum Council and a contract position that Brent Sanford served in. With that, when they started the program, we were actually one of the first communities that received outreach to say we need a community partner to dive in on this. As you've kind of spotlighted the legal side of it, and having an attorney and somebody that specializes in this area is not something that's within our region. There was a law firm out of Alaska, for example, in this case that was identified that specialized in the Ukrainian effort and bringing in the humanitarian effort first. And that was very unique compared to what the Office of Legal Integration is doing. They are bringing in workers that are ready to hit the ground. This was a humanitarian effort first, but then really a workforce solution for the oil and gas sector. So we actually were on the front end, and part of that is because we had 3 companies within our region, Credence, Sampro, and Nukota were the 3 initial. So we needed to kind of tier it in multiple different ways. So we worked with Brent Sanford and the North Dakota Petroleum Council a couple of months to try to get this all in place, identify a firm that could help us as far as with it. And then a key hurdle that we learned as far as with this kind of, because this was one of the first big efforts, through an organization to take this on, was that the cost of it, but then also too, you needed community sponsors. And so at that point, I know a couple other communities were brought in, but the first actually Ukrainians that moved to North Dakota through Bach and Grow were to mine it. I think, Kelly, to put you on the spot, was 3 individuals came on the first trip, and we had 10 relocate here that are still working in the area. What we found too is we still are serving as a resource for that. The program, I think you also asked Tyler that where the program stands today. At this point, they're putting a pause on it. The Petroleum Council put the $3,000 up for every one of those individuals. And then we as community partners liaison finding housing, the furniture needed, all the basics, necessities. Minot, for example, leaned in on service clubs, the goodwill of the people in the community. And so we administer that program, and we still do though, even though the program has taken a step back, we are still working with Ukrainians that are now helping to bring some of their families here. And so they're still working to support those 3 oil and gas companies in our area.
Okay, Justin?
Going back to those families from New York, just that are moving to Harvey, what would be New York's motivation to pay for people to leave their state?
Well, it's a great question. In the news, they've been pretty vocal on that their shelter program will be expiring at the end of this year, which is December 31st. So there are families that have been living and working in New York. All of these individuals already work, but because they're working in New York City, they can't afford to move out of the shelter system.
Gotcha.
And so they've been looking for ways and places that they can relocate to. And it is more cost effective for New York's asylee program to fund that relocation cost than to try to secure more longer term housing in New York City.
Okay, thank you.
There was a person there.
All right, anything else, committees for Katie and Jenna? Okay, thanks so much, you guys. We appreciate it. Okay. Are you leading there?
Actually, Heather's gonna go first.
Okay. Oh, yeah,
For those that don't know, this is Heather Lemoyne from Commerce Tourism Division.
I'm marketing and research manager. I can trap you two ways. I can talk about North Dakota for days and days and days. I also am a research person, which means I could drone on about facts and figures like all that.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Yep. Is that okay?
Great.
Like, you know,
And do you mind if I
I'll switch over to this one.
There you go. Don't touch anything. Here you go. Careful.
All right. In the interest of time, I've got a few slides in here that are very overlook of what tourism and marketing does at the Department of Commerce, and I'm going to just really lightly touch on those. So our mission is really about increasing and improving the awareness of North Dakota, the image of North Dakota, and of course, all of the great things to see and do here within the state, and bring non-residents and their dollars to the state of North Dakota to increase the economic impact of our communities. So what is tourism? It's economic diversification. And one of the really beautiful things is that how it touches every county and every community in North Dakota. It enhances,
Whoa,
see
not
things
really
or,
my fault.
oh, okay. I was
I
like,
don't know
what
how
did
to
I
go
do?
back now.
Now
Take
how do I go back?
Take back all the
Oh,
nice
there you
things.
go. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Hold on, guys.
What screen am I driving on? Okay.
Sorry, that's my fault.
Workforce and business recruitment as part of the hospitality industry. Now, this is an industry that was hardest hit by layoffs during COVID. And so you've all been at hotels, at restaurants, when everyone is saying, be kind to the workforce because they are short-staffed. That's very, very true of the leisure and hospitality industry. It is considered an export economy. So that friendly North Dakota-ness that we lean into is definitely part of the economic driver for this industry. And of course, everything that residents love to see and do are what visitors love to see and do. And so enhancing that quality of life just being part of community vitality is at the heart and center of the travel industry. I'm going to click on these really quickly. So the industry is really made up of businesses, including those accommodations, restaurants, retail. The number two thing, top two things that we do on vacation is eat and shop. And but we also know that the industry isn't entirely 100% visitor focused, right? Residents are also eating and shopping. And so there is specialized research that goes into finding what the economic impact of tourism is. It's called a tourism satellite account. And I'm going to share a little bit about that. But those cultural offerings, the arts that drive communities, the destinations, the regions. I'm a born Minnesotan, but grew up in North Dakota, but Eastern North Dakota, right? You would think, right, if we talk just population-wise, Fargo should have the biggest high school rodeo club. Fargo does not have a high school rodeo club, right? Because the draw, the passion, those are things that are really very Western North Dakota centric. And so our destinations, the uniqueness of the destinations are part of the thing that really draws visitors here. What is our office doing? Again, our office is really about growing awareness and visitation of North Dakota. We are also increasingly focused on destination development. How do we keep people in North Dakota and spending money longer? How are we growing and supporting our industries and our partners? So from the state level, how do we continue to create maybe cooperative marketing programs, promotional avenues that can support great partners like Visit Mina? We are communicating, of course, both the visiting North Dakota, but also we recognize that the visit is the first date. And how does that correlate with people moving to North Dakota? And then all of these things and the value of Department of Commerce and all of the programs that are happening within the Department of Commerce is part of the overall marketing mission for our tourism and marketing division. And very multifaceted, right? We've got marketing that's going on globally. We've got marketing that's specific to what we call the hook and bullet audience. Those great big, very expensive buses that come for events like HUSFest You know, there are avenues and approaches for each one of those. And similarly, there are, for the Find a Good Life campaign as well, we have target markets. So one of them that you might see advertising for right now is the boomerang audience. So these are people who may have formerly been North Dakotans. They have left the state and we want to return them to the state, and especially when people come home for the holidays. We're trying to target market to that audience, that you don't just have to come home for the holidays, you can come home for good. And look at how affordable, look at how many opportunities, look at how great our schools are. So in terms of tourism research, we work with a company called Tourism Economics. They're an Oxford economics company. They really own the market share for doing economic impact research for all states and countries. So they are the company that works for the US Travel Association and a number of different states. We last measured our 2023 travel year, and this is just, the graph is a picture of visitation. So North Dakota, we totally made up for losses from COVID fully in 2022 and 23. We had our highest visitation year to date, more than 25 million visitors to the state of North Dakota. Visitor spending also grew, those visitors with direct visitor spending at $3.3 billion. 17.8 million day visitors, and then what those visitors spend in taxes. This is one of my, my research sound bites. Though, having those visitors, it offsets the taxes that we would have to spend as residents to maintain services in the communities.
Real quick.
Yes.
Do you have like a heat map of those? Maybe you're gonna give us that heat map of where those people are coming from?
I do. I don't have it in here.
Okay.
So like this map would be visitor spending.
Okay. Like, are we pulling Canadians? Are we pulling, when you talk about outside of the state? Like, are we pulling people from East Coast, West Coast?
Yeah. So I work with a geolocation company called Arrivalist, and through Arrivalist, privacy, it's a little bit tighter for us to be able to get that with a lot of specificity, especially with Canada's concerned. Canada's data privacy laws will be top over. So Canada has a great organization called Statistics Canada. It's a centralized statistical agency. There isn't an equivalent in the United States. They survey their residents, and then we're able to get data from them on visitation. Advantage of more opportunities, but our price increases in inflation also representing an increase in spending. That's true also. And when we look at visitor spending by county, for the first time ever, Cass County, which is our Fargo's most visited city, it hit more than $1 billion in visitor spending in 2023. And then of course you can see how spending will follow I-94 or I-29. Some of our most profitable counties for visitor spending are the counties with casinos in them. And all of that is reflected in this research. I have just a quick snapshot of Ward County. So also when you talk about inflationary costs, also with additional things to do, So these are the sectors that make up the travel industry, right? And there's not just one that is tourism. So it's super easy to just, go to the Bureau of Economic Analysis and be able to download. It's segments of each of these industries, because these are all industries that impact residents and have resident spending as well, which is why there's specific methodology carved out by companies who are very entrepreneurial. So the lodging industry. Of course, there have been increases in how much it costs to rent a hotel room. And so you're going to see both an increase in spending for lodging, but we also are monitoring how many increases we've had in building hotels or more hotel rooms. What's that occupancy doing, as well as the revenue for the occupancy. Food and beverage. We know that there are some inflationary increases in there as well, but again, the number one thing that visitors do is eat. And they don't cut back. It's culinary tourism, and where you go for a really fine meal is still a driver where tourism is concerned. No one visits a city because of the McDonald's, but they do because of other great restaurants and opportunities in a community. Retail, of course, the number one things that were flying off the shelves in 2020, were the motorhomes and the kayaks and the canoes and the bicycles. But that recreation, even in 23, continuing to grow. People wanting and seeking to do recreational services. That includes arts, ticket sales, those types of opportunities in recreation. Transportation was actually the slowest growing for both Ward County and statewide. And sometimes that's a bit of a disconnect, right? Because we talk all the time about gas prices going up and airline prices going up. But North Dakota being one of the most affordable states that you can visit, I think that's why we weather recessions better than so many other states, because people still are going to travel. They still want to be able to share those experiences with their family. They still want to visit friends and relatives, but where they do it then makes that difference.
A question quickly on the lodging number.
Yes.
Does that account for like the rise in like Airbnbs and those kinds of things, where less people are staying in hotels and now renting more of the temporary housing?
Yeah, so as you know, Airbnb, VRBO, they also collect lodging taxes, and those things are reported both to the North Dakota Tax Department and to, of course, VA. And so the lodging tax number would be reflective of all of that. We also get local reports from CoStar, was SDR, Star Reports. And so this is a snapshot of 2023, but how is Ward County doing in 24? And what I'm really happy to report is the growth is really outpacing the rest of the state in Ward County. So I think year to date, Ward County is seeing an 11% increase in occupancy rate, where Cass County, I think, is at 2%. So we are seeing, even when we're looking at demand and growth statewide, you see those bright spots. And we talked a little bit, Katie mentioned, I think she mentioned the halo effect. And so the best way for me to even explain the halo effect of advertising and the impact that this has on the state's image as a whole is really, you think about when you watch the Olympics, and Procter & Gamble will do an ad every year that's about a feel-good ad about the parents of Olympians. Has absolutely nothing to do with the products that Procter & Gamble sells. Or it's kind of like Budweiser with the Clydesdales, right? But it's about building the brand and about feeling good about America, feeling good about these individuals. So the halo effect of the advertising that we do just to visit North Dakota has notable marked increases on just the straight image of North Dakota as a place to live, as a place to raise a family, to relocate for a career, to start a business. And we also lean very, very heavily into partnerships in our office. Our director, Sarah, she will say in her presentations, we know in our office, we have nothing to sell. I can't sell you a ticket to any place. I can't book you a room. And so we are the conduit that drives out to every community, every business in the hospitality industry in North Dakota. So we lean very heavily into great partners like Visit Minot to really close the deal, close the sale, continuing to get that business to the state of North Dakota. And this is just an illustration of the partners around the state who are helping, who are doing cooperative advertising with us, hosting media and influencers. A lot of times people want to know, I'll tell you, okay, we had, 20, 25 million visitors to North Dakota, and people want to know, is that good or bad? Is that 3 billion in spending? Is that good or bad? How do we compare? And one of the best comparisons that I can offer you is how do the Dakotas compare? So if we look just at our direct visitor spending, $5 billion, that total, sort of the induced, indirect, a little bit higher. But visitor volume, I think, is notable. South Dakota's visitor volume is 14.7 million. It is less than the state of North Dakota. And here's why. South Dakota's day to overnight visitors is almost a 1-to-1. For North Dakota, we have 2.5 times more day visitors. Now, South Dakota's big population centers are Sioux Falls and Rapid City. The third highest populated city for South Dakota is Aberdeen. And in that gap between Aberdeen and Rapid City, the state of North Dakota fits communities like Williston, Minot, Dickinson, Jamestown, communities that, as you all know, are hosting a ton of hockey tournaments, a ton of softball tournaments, a ton of concerts, have a lot of shopping going on. And so what we really desire to do in our office is turn those day visitors into overnight visitors. We want to we know that people are coming to North Dakota. We know they are. We want to keep them for a lot longer instead of just spending the day with us and then heading back home.
And those day visitors, are they just traveling through, or are they stopping somewhere along the way?
Again, all things are going to be true. So in the research, you have to stay, or in the geolocation, you have to stay more than 2 hours in a destination to be considered a visitor. This is a question that Jamestown asks all the time because they are a stopping point. And so they want to know, are people just filling their gas and going on through, or are they lingering? And so we look at those then that are the visitor, staying more than 2 hours, right? Are they going to the Buffalo and taking a picture? Are they checking out the museum really quick? Are they in some way making an economic impact beyond just filling up a tank of gas or stretching legs? And so, so we do have, of course, visitors, people who are just passing through. Those who aren't lingering and staying aren't going to be part of that 25 million. Those who are spending more than 2 hours in any one of the stopping points are going to be considered a visitor. We do visitor research that also looks at where are these people going. We know that we're part of a greater road trip, and so large, 85%, 90% of North Dakota's visitation is domestic visitation, as opposed to the rest of the 10% would be international in Canada. But that 90%, about 40% of that is North Dakotans visiting and touring in their own state. Minnesota, of course, is next largest. Then we've got this duel that's going on between Wisconsin and Illinois. And Illinois has been our #1 state for website traffic this year. It has edged Wisconsin for visits. Colorado is crawling up really fast from beneath them. Texas has entered the top 5 of pretty much all things this year. And so when we look at that research, we know that they're leaving the Chicago area, right? They're maybe doing an overnight in a concert or a baseball game in Minneapolis, and they're coming to North Dakota. And they're making a couple stops, and they might have an overnight in one of the cities, or this is National Park or International Peace Garden, and then it might be Glacier, it might be Yellowstone, or it might be Mount Rushmore. But we are sort of this loop of visitation. There's, I think, another marketing angle. I think there's going to be a lot of really great opportunity for us when the Presidential Library opens up, because the things that we can connect around Teddy Roosevelt in this whole geographic area, it's just going to be great press and more opportunity for development. I answered your question in a really long-winded way.
Well, and where I was going with that is, like, if I'm a truck driver and I leave Chicago, now is North Dakota my first stop where I have to stop for my rest breaks, and now I'm there over 2 hours. Is that influencing your data, or is it people that are actually engaged?
Okay, so that's very super relevant question, because what the geolocation data also does, not specific to the company that we work with, but most of these geolocation companies, because they so easily know where home is now and what your day-to-day routine is, they can filter out UPS drivers who are constantly going between Sioux Falls and Fargo, or if there is a certain route. Now, if there's a unique route, sure, that can show in the data. If, we often get the question about legislators who then are spending a couple of months in Bismarck. I mean, because the data is anonymized, I couldn't tell you specifically if that person is being considered a visitor. I do know that they're using the visitor economy. So it's, in many cases, staying in hotels or, sort of renting a long-term Airbnb. So it's possible, it's very possible that they are being considered a visitor for a certain part of the time. But you have to be outside of your day-to-day norm. We specifically looked at this with the oil and gas industry, right? Because we don't want to count the people who are living in North Dakota 3 to 4 weeks. And so it's why we dug into that. And we do know that UPS runs a daily route in Sioux Falls to all the hospitals and Fargo. Destination development, I know I had mentioned just really briefly how that is a focus. We want to be able to turn these day trips into longer stays in North Dakota. Our marketing, so we'll spend about $4 million this year. Marketing North Dakota, that's still $10 million less than the state of South Dakota, or Minnesota, and even less than Montana, but we are really strategic. So that dual hat that I wear of the research and the marketing, it's really why we dig into where are these people at, what do they like to do, what are their motivators for visiting North Dakota, so that we can be super efficient and targeted with the advertising that we do, which I think is why we're getting really solid results. Something to be proud of in our office is the results that we're getting. And I'd love to show the picture of this train in Chicago. The creative has been so good that so this is the train that was supposed to be unwrapped off of transit in Chicago at the end of July when our contract was done. It continues to be up because it's a really bright and wonderful thing for what is otherwise a really gray downtown. They still have our yellow train route from 2023 up, and so we've got more than 72 million bonus impressions, just because the advertising is good and bright and makes an impact in that way. So a quick just stat on return on investment. We know that we are not motivating all of those 25 million people that visit North Dakota. So don't get me wrong, our office is not trying to take credit for every single one of those visits. But what we do look at is how effective was our advertising and who did the advertising specifically motivate. And so our advertising effectiveness research also delves into what do people do, what do they see, how much do they spend. And so for every $1 that we invested in advertising, that returned $34 in direct spending or $3 in tax ROI. And then, of course, tourism is that conduit to talent and resident recruitment. And it's Stephanie's colleague at Fargo who says this, tourism is like a first date. And I'm sure you've been in a situation yourself where you have visited somewhere and you or your partner said, I see myself living here. This would be a great place to live. That's the same situation for us. And we worked with the North Dakota Department of Transportation to send a survey out to anyone who had transferred a driver's license to the state of North Dakota in the last 3 years. And this research was done in 2022, so it would have been those 3 years prior. 76% reported that they visited North Dakota before they decided to move here. And that Good Life campaign is, of course, also being run out of our office, tourism and marketing department, and it really kind of combines this whole message of visiting North Dakota and, of course, turning into residents. And I'm sure your families are similar to mine, right? My mom's one of 40 first cousins. I'm one of 25 first cousins. My kids have 12 first cousins. we aren't sustaining the size of population for the state, and so bringing in those new residents is really a key to continued economic growth for North Dakota. That's the slides I have for you.
Anything else for Heather?
Just real quick, do you, and this might be more so for staff, but as far as like the gaps, like when we talk about like tourism opportunities and services, you know, when people go to Wisconsin, you go on a fishing charter, you go like guiding services, like, are there opportunities that you guys see people want to see with it that the state can do a better job of? You know, you go to distillery, we talk about our alcohol review and rewrite, leaving a space for a distillery license. You know, people go on a distillery tour, or brewery tours, or whatever it might be. Do you guys see any of the gaps, or is there any opportunities you guys identify with where we can compete more, to bring more people in, to get those overnight stays? Do you guys see any of those things? I know it's a broad question, but.
Yeah.
Well, what I can answer off the bat, and I do talk a little bit about this in mine and to show even the gap of the difference in visitation trends of when they're coming and when they're not coming, and really where we think the greatest opportunity for growth is. What I can tell you about that, Paul, is the Destination Development Fund, where that was the $25 million that the state allocated. I mean, the whole mission behind that was to get more humans to stay longer here, because every data stat we have, it doesn't matter across the board. We know that we're getting a lot of people coming to the state, and they're flipping right through the state and leaving on the other side. So that's the whole thing with Destination Development. We'll see what happens this year if the funding gets done, but breweries was on the list originally. Arts and entertainment is another big one. Unique accommodations was another big one, because people want unique accommodations.
Campgrounds?
It can be like
It
unique,
can.
yeah.
I would say, so I think as of 2000, the US was more urban born than rural born, which marked a big shift for the country. Agritourism continues to be this desired feature for a state like North Dakota, right? Where we still have the gigantic tractors that some people have only ever seen on TV. Our office gets calls all summer long from people who ask us, what plant is growing at mile marker 141?
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been working with, Department of Agriculture just about how do we put signs for what the crops are growing. But I think your instincts are exactly right. We would love to see more hunting guides and outfitters. We just had a hunting photo shoot on the end of October. And we had to do that on private land and plots land because our guides and outfitters are booked. They can't sacrifice 3 days of paid business in order to accommodate a photo shoot. And Berkeley land was fantastic, and it was plots land, and we love to be able to show that too. But the challenge of working with the Corps, right? Would we absolutely be able to promote the heck out of a fishing lodge and charters and guides on Lake Sakakawea? Is that an amazing gateway and opportunity for the community? Absolutely. But we have some challenges there, right? And I think your instincts are going to be right in all of those types of initiatives. I mean, when we are doing activations and special events, like we did a sponsorship for the first time with the Waste Management Phoenix Open. That's a golf-centric advertising program, right? We know that there's a big golf audience there. We know that summer is really hot for them and their golf is very expensive. But we can talk about direct flights to North Dakota, amazing access to golf courses, more golf courses per capita than any other state, golf courses that are affordable, and look at all those hours of daylight that we have that you can hit the course. So, but there are all of those audiences that we try to, and the more that we can continue to develop those assets. So if you're selling a golf trip and you want to be able to make that an all-inclusive golf trip, right? Then where does that golfer stay? Where do they eat? And
You don't have to call the Department of Commerce to find out crops. You just call me.
Yeah.
Stop calling it.
You know what's funny about that? We get asked in our visitor center, we get asked this on the week of what are those big round things that we're throwing to bales? We weekly or more often, depending if it's, July, August, just higher numbers. We get asked this all the time about ag stuff.
USDA module that you build like a tour map of crops and, you know, when flax is purple and.
We have a sheet that shows the top crops that North Dakota produces. There's 10 or 11 of them that are the top, that North Dakota's the top producer of. We have that sheet prepared and ready to hand out because we get asked about that often.
Right, and that's actually easier than fall color season. Oh, that thing, the season's a little longer.
We do.
If you wanna see flax, if you wanna see canola, and you got all kinds of colors.
Right, that's where we don't know what that mile marker 141,
Yeah.
we're like, what color is it?
Yeah.
It's July, it's July.
Yeah, you just integrated into Onyx. So
Yeah, there you go.
You'd be right there as
Yeah.
well, so,
Yeah.
yeah, we've got the data.
Could, you know, our farmers are far too busy to actually have guests
Yeah.
come to their farm to take a ride in, you know, a tractor with the type of automation that it has today. But would people buy that? Absolutely. You know, there's such interest. And so developing the product that we can sell is kind of the next chapter.
Anything else for Heather? Otherwise, we'll let Steph take over.
I'm gonna jump right in, because I know we're kind of over time, so I'm gonna plug right in, because Chairman Lesson asked us to keep it to 90 minutes. So, the one thing I wanna talk about, just to kind of pivot off of what Heather said, is she talked about the segments of the, you know, who's coming. And, you know, I really think when we're talking about tourism's role in economic development, I don't see this answer as being golf as the sole answer, or fishing, or hunting, or ecotourism. It's the same as every other component to most businesses, which says we need to move the needle on every single one of the options. And that is what will actually move the needle in the end. Like I said, I'm gonna click through this, so stop me. I'm gonna try to talk slow because I'm a fast talker, but stop me when I'm not making sense. Okay, so this is the model in which we work. I think it's the best way, at least for us, to be able to communicate. Here's the humans that are coming into Ward County. This is the tourism model for Visit Minot in Ward County. Here's the humans that are coming into Ward County. Keep in mind, Visit Minot's customer are people from outside Ward County. That is black and white for us. They're from outside of Ward County is our customer. It's not hotels, it's not restaurants, those are our partners. Our customer, that's who we talk to, and that's why we're there every day. So humans come in and they bring us money. They are here for either leisure, sports, or meetings. That's those are three kind of segments of who we talk to. But the thing about it is even that needs to be broken down. Because when we look at leisure, well, we look at a couple things. Military is a big one of that the chamber serves. And those are people who are coming here to visit family. And yeah, there's also a big segment that are coming here to work. But we see them in the visitor center weekly or daily in the summertime where they're here to visit family. Healthcare, we break down these three. So when they come in with their money, this is what they do. Hopefully they stay in a hotel. If they stay in a hotel, Visit Minot gets 2/3 of the tax, the hotel tax of what they stay in. But we get 2/3 of that, 3%. So we get 2%. With the rest of their money, we want them to go to all of these things. We want them to go to restaurants and the fair and shopping and all the things, the zoo and all those things. Why do we care about that? Because of the model that you guys are talking about right here. What happens when it's organic growth? Because money comes in, it goes to those entities, and then they're able to grow, right? So what happens is they grow, expand, grow into Minot, create more things, which in turn hopefully means more humans are coming in. So that is the circle, our circle of life. Is what that's how we, I guess, see that model working for us. So we're gonna dive right into data. I had heard last time you guys were talking about you want to see stuff driven by data, and I can tell you that's what we do. Everything we do everything by data. And so when you talk about Dave, you asked the question of like, are these truck drivers or whatever? I have to tell you, I didn't believe necessarily that there were this many people coming into Minot on a daily basis in our visitor center this summer. We had people signing our guest book from all 50 states and 28 countries. In the visitor center, in Minot, signing our visitors guest book or whatever I'm trying to say. You see the stats, and we're North Dakota, and they're like, I don't see these, where are these humans? Where are these visitors at, right? Where are they? Well, they're here and you don't always see them. You go to work, you go to the grocery store, whatever, you don't always see them on a daily basis. I invite you to come into the visitor center in the summer and you'll see them because they are a visitor center every day. So what do you see here? This is, when we talk about pain points, I really believe that I have no problem being transparent about some of the pain points and some of the things that aren't going so well. I think in order for you guys to do your job, you need to be able to see the things that are going well for our industry and the things that aren't necessarily going as well. And this paints that picture. So let me explain it. So first thing I want to point out, this is not our data. We get, Heather used the Rivalist, we use Datafy. What's really cool, they have 2 different data sources. They match, maybe not 100%, but they're aligned. Okay, so over here, the blue line is 2024. And over here, I guess the blue line is still 2024, but it's on the opposite side. So over here, because it looks like, well, this is contradicting information. This is information from January through October of 2024, okay? And it looks like, well, wait a minute, this data is contradicting each other because I can tell you our marketing egos want to believe this, right? This says the monthly visitation. This means the number of humans coming into Ward County. It's, for the most part, there are more humans coming here, which are reflected in the other data that Heather talks about, right? This is the part that our marketing ego takes a hit. And that is because you look at it and it's like, in a lot of cases, we're down or flat. We were up in August, but there's not a lot of that. Monthly volume by visitor days is the amount of time that these visitors are staying in Minot. And it's less. It's less, even in comparison, right, to last year. You know, we can say, is that because, you know, things are costing more money? People are moving on. They're not staying in town as long. There's lots of different factors that come here. We know from staff, we talk to people. Come to the visitor center and listen for an hour. And you are going to hear them say, oh yeah, we're doing North Dakota. We're here for 2 days. We're popping through in one night. Or it's either 3 days, 2 nights, or 2 days, 1 night. That is who's coming through North Dakota. North Dakota's getting them quickly, and then they're right back out. One of the things that Visit Minot did a couple years ago is we partnered with, because we saw this and it was like, how do we solve this? It's not solved, but it's helped. We partnered with, because these people are hitting the high points, right? They're hitting the Peace Gardens, they're hitting Medora, they're hitting MHA, they're hitting Minot. Well, I'll get to that in a second. We partnered. We have a partnership right now with the Peace Gardens, MHA, and they have their interpreter center, and Medora. And so we've got this, we reserved ndroadtrip.com, and that's taking people on those highlights of North Dakota. I can say this, and I would like you to close your ears just briefly, Heather. So the deal is, you know, from Minot, our perspective is, our goal is to get them off of 94. They're whipping through the state, and it drives us nuts. So our goal is to get them off of 94. A couple of years ago, we were at the International Tour Operators Conference, IPW, in San Antonio, and I'm sitting with our North Dakota partners, and we all recognize our role. Each of our role is to, yes, promote North Dakota, but to do what we're there to do, promote our community. And I was there to represent Highway 2, a different partnership that we have with Grand Forks, Devils Lake, Minot. And I'm like, if you want to see the Badlands, there, because it's all about the Badlands, right? You guys want to see the Badlands? Well, the best way to see the Badlands is not on 94. You can't do anything out in 10 minutes. You don't see the Badlands on 94. I got, my shin was black and blue from the number of kicks I got under the table. But the truth is, that's what I said, because you know what? Our job is to get them off of 94. And if they want to see the Badlands, that's the best way to do it. And then that's how we get them ideally up on a Sandy road trip and through our thing, through our path. You're gonna forget that last piece, right?
No, okay. We're right. I mean, when we're doing international promotion, it isn't about Visit Fargo, right? Because every state has a big city, right? But it, you know, we'll talk about what makes the state unique.
Yeah. So the other thing I want to mention, I didn't mention here, and I should have, is this does not, I can slice and dice this data for hours. This, what I'm showing you today is people who live 50 miles away. They are outside of Ward County and they're more than 50 miles away. So we can track this to 0, we can track this to lots of different things, but this today is showing 50 miles. This is the other thing that I want to talk about, and this is credit card spend. This is the thing, so when we talk about when we talk about really the numbers that mean the most to us, in tourism, it's about new money, right? It is not about getting the people who live in Minot to go do things necessarily. We don't like to count that. We like to count the people who are new money to Minot. They come to Minot, they drop their money, and then they go home for this community to be able to use. That's our number one mission, right? More humans here to do that. So this is what I'm going to show you. This side over here is credit card spend. It is all spend, right? So this is comparing 2024, and it only goes to the end of August because that's all the data that we have. It collects tax anyway. So you can see Ward County is right at 70%. So what that means is credit card spend in Ward County, 30% comes from outside of Ward County. We're proud of that number. The other side over here that you see, and the reason you're not seeing like Williams County aligning with Williams County is because this is a separate, it's the same data, but I sliced it differently. This takes out Ward County. It takes out anybody within 50 miles, right? So this shows us the value of this market. So again, Chairman Blesson, you were talking about data and how we're driven by it. And like, this is what we're looking at. And it doesn't always feel good, right? But it's like, well, if the proof's in the pudding, then you make pivots and you make adjustments and you see what looks different next time after you've made some adjustments, right? So you can see here that for the most part, most of the counties are up, some are down, right? But like I said, you talk about data and that's why that is our role basically in this. Our goal is to increase visitor spending and to create the demand. You know, in tourism, we all talk about supply and demand. That's kind of what you were talking about, Paul, is, you know, we can stand on the mountaintop and say, hey, come to Minot, come to Ward County, come to Minot, come to Minot, come to Minot. But in a lot of ways, it is like the first date. Go back a few years, some of those years are a lot longer than others in the room, but back to the dating years, and you go, okay, you know what, though we have to create the appeal. Because you can say, hey, come on over here, come on over here, I want to talk to you, come on into Minot. But if Minot isn't looking overly appealing to that person, you can spend a whole lot of money on advertising that gets wasted. So that's our, I guess I'll say, approach to how we do this. There's a gap in supply. There's an absolute gap in supply. This is also something I don't like to say out loud. I see Jill across the room and the people online. The other thing I like to say out loud is, you know, come into the visitor center and say, hey, okay, you're in Minot, you're an out-of-stater. What do you want to do here? Answer that question. Say, I'm that person. I am here, I'm in your town. What is there to go see and do? We have stuff. What's going to keep me here overnight? What's going to keep me here for 8 hours? So when we talk about the opportunity of how tourism can help economic development, we're showing we're a player at the table, right? I hope we show that we're a piece of that puzzle. Right? You know, we're an instrument in this symphony. Certainly. How can we do better? How can our industry do better to keep those people here longer, which means keeping that money here, which will in fact also really impact economic development.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Can we go back to the spending, credit card spending? You said Ward County.
Yes.
30%
yes.
comes from outside of.
Yeah.
Let me glue by that, and I kind of that piqued my interest tonight.
Let me make it more clear because I want to make sure I said it right too. So what I was saying is credit card spend in Ward County, 70% comes from people inside of Ward County. 30% comes from people that live outside of Ward County.
Okay, so those numbers up there are people from
this right here. So when you see Ward County, so that's the difference between this chart and that chart. The left chart, it includes Ward County. The right chart, I was saying, so what the difference on the top spending is, that means the top spending to Minot for people that don't live here. That's the difference between the two. Does that make sense to you?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So Steph, this would have the sort of the same questions that we have with statewide stuff, which is that's going to grab gas, right? So when people are using a credit card at a truck stop or at a gas station on a bypass, that's going to be included.
I can cut that out.
Okay.
I can cut that out.
Does this include that right now?
This includes retail, restaurant, gas, accommodations, and recreation, yes. Although I will say it did cut out, our data supplier did realize they did cut out MLT's, because it was throwing off numbers, so they actually did, because MLT looks like a vacations in Minot, they pulled that data out of this because it was making it look better than it is.
And so really for me, where this all gets really interesting, and it's all the commerce side of it as well, is you have people that are coming in North Dakota. I think for our purposes, we'd love to see that through a couple points that gets all the way to new resident, right? Like, I mean, that in the end, that would be really cool because somebody that came by, they love North Dakota or they were thinking about it, they get all the way to that point. Because yeah, it's great that we've got the tax spend and all the things that go with that, but those are transitory, right? Things can really change quickly. Dave's got that in my head all the time right now.
Yeah.
Sales tax can be a little iffy for us. And if if you go through a COVID level event, something's gone, right? It just vaporizes. And so the idea would be, this is all a part of a driver to whether you're looking, and this is what we'll talk about at the end here, increased population, increased tax base, all of the things that are drivers of good things in a municipal or in a city. This is a component of that, right? Because people gotta look at North Dakota as a possibility as a place to live. They've got to look at it as something that could be good for them, and that's a quality of life thing. It's good schools, it's good everything, right? And so that's kind of in my mind how I tie all this together. It's not exactly what you're doing, but it does drive the end result.
Completely.
Right?
And I would like to, Chairman Bless, I'd like to mention one other thing, because we just last week had some people, it was on a Friday evening, the husband and wife from Salt Lake. They were in our office, he was here for an interview. He didn't tell me what industry, but he was here for an interview. He's from Salt Lake. And we work with the chamber really closely, but they had a relocation guide. And so now, we talk to people in our office all the time and give them that relocation guide or say, hey, if you need more information or whatever, talk to the chamber. Oftentimes, they want that relocation guide. We get calls about it all the time, and we direct them to the chamber's relocation guide, or we have some of those on hand to make sure that we can hand them out at that time too. There's no doubt that we talk to people, because if they're in town, they're checking things out. And so they come right into our front door and we have those conversations often.
Okay, Chairman Wesson, I so identify with your need to also triangulate the data, right? So we're looking at those sales tax receipts, we're looking at the visitor traffic, we're looking at the geolocation, we're looking at website traffic, and really taking a look at all of those markets at the same time, because you're right, the numbers might not one-to-one match, but are those trend lines exactly the same? Are we seeing that consistency with Illinois in several different places in order to know, yeah, that's really worth the spend? We talk about Colorado, crawling its way up. Our visitors from Colorado are spending more than 2 nights in state. That is the highest. And so we're spending more than our dollars in Colorado. It's just a more profitable audience for us to market to. We did a talent/tourism recruitment event in Denver over Father's Day weekend. And so I was there and got to have those conversations. So anecdotally, people would go by. We were right outside the Coors Field. We had a partnership with the Colorado Rockies this year, and so we had this 4-hole mini golf course. Families were going to Father's Day games at a baseball game, and people would walk up. Why is North Dakota here? And I'd say there are so many similarities between Coloradans and North Dakotans. There is a love for the outdoors. There is a love for outdoor recreation, and the problem that Coloradans are having right now is you go to your favorite trail to hike, and there are 200 people on the path with you and not a place to park. You can't hardly afford your house anymore. And in North Dakota, we can offer all of these great amenities and great quality of life. And you get these people like, yeah, you're right. And oh yeah, my kids can't go out of the house after 7 p.m. anymore. And so we like, come and check this out. What are you most supposed to do? A baseball game? They have to tell you about these communities. We talk about and hot pots, and fun to compare that to the boom that is the Savannah Bananas, and all those great things are going on. So But triangulating the data, being able to.
My park board member had over here, so it started a year ago, I got some running software guy who developed new environment and software. I went through it, he did, overall park zoo. Did that, and I don't remember all the data specifically, but it's kind of neat to see, you know, where people are coming from. And it was, I think, the number one place people go before they go to the zoo and after the zoo was McDonald's. It's kind of, you know, I don't know why, but so.
It's because.
So, but I'm just thinking about like, how can we, or maybe you do this, but how can we educate people in Minot, like the zoo, Cornfield, whatever it might be, maybe you do this already, but to know where these people are coming from, to help them know where to try to market to, or where to market.
Yeah.
Where they're not coming from, and try to figure that thing out, because it was, and for like on the park board member side, that where should we be looking and focusing on our money? Where should we be, does the zoo need to improve, do we need to improve Cornfield, all those sort of things, so. It's like your thoughts.
You're my favorite person in the room right now for asking this question. And I'll tell you why. We do all of that. We've got geofences drawn around Mesa Arena and the United City Discovery Center and downtown and the zoo and the state fairgrounds and the mall and each hotel and the airport. Oh, there's Minot State. And so we know all those things. And previously because Ellie had reached out when that I can't remember what, I think it was data by a different company, I think it was Article, reached out to you guys for this, and I'm like, I don't need to pay for that. We share that data with, I've met with the zoo before, we meet with every one of our partners at our stakeholder meetings and share this exact information. So yes, I would be happy to, it's been a couple of years, it was right when the last zoo manager came in that we shared this information. Jennifer knows. Jennifer was there at the time at the zoo when we shared this exact data with them. We think that's a service that Divine has to provide to some of our partners. It's like, well, we're already paying for the data. Don't pay for it too. Let's just slice and dice it and get it.
Yeah. Well, one of the disadvantages I have is I have a partner in my office that's lived in mine for 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
And he's an old gruff guy, doesn't like to pay property tax, doesn't like to pay sales tax. Spends 7 months a year in Arizona, so he's not used to it anyway. But he doesn't believe that stuff, right? So he's a resident that doesn't believe people come to Minot to go to the zoo.
Right.
He doesn't believe a Canadian drives down here and takes his kids to the Mesa Arena. He thinks everybody in Minot goes to the grocery store and goes home, and no one comes here to visit. So how do we educate those people to get behind tourism and visit Minot?
You know, that is an uphill battle. I like to fish, and in my time off, I like to do some walleye fishing. What I've learned from walleye fishing is that I fish where I can catch the fish.
Amen.
And that to go fish a bay where there's no fish, or maybe there's a fish who not very hungry. I mean, I believe our greatest opportunity is to sell to people that are at least willing to have an open mind to listen to it. I can show data. I can have them come in and sit in the visitor center all day long. I would love to have this one-on-one conversation with anyone because we have the information. I believe it, and I will die on that hill because I know it's accurate. But you know what? At the end of the day, if someone doesn't want to believe it and chooses not to believe it, I'm going to use my resources and my energy talking to the people that are willing to at least see that vision. So I can tell you in most of the speeches I've given, for those of you who've been in here, who's heard me multiple times, I tout the 28, when the number grows throughout the year. When I speak in July, I say, well, it's about 20 countries so far and about 47 states or whatever that number is. At the end of the day, if a person chooses to not believe me, that's their choice.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you think that's something that maybe you could offer up to the public, like listing where you're geocaching in specific areas and then open up, like have an event, like a full day where you kind of review for business owners or people in the community that want to come know that information?
Yes, we did that last February. We had our stakeholders meeting where theoretically some of the people in this room were there. But I think you guys should have been invited to that if you're on our B2B list. If you're not, then we need to get you there. But we had this very stakeholder meeting to talk about this exact thing. We actually brought a rep in from Datafy
to speak to it so that it's not me making it look like, you know what I mean? It's like they're an outside company.
And that it isn't unique to mine. I wouldn't believe the number of people who go to the national park who don't realize that there's a musical. Theodore National Park has already broken its record for visitation this year. But to the point too about education or just the naysayers, and Texas is one of the states that has boastful, right, most statewide. And Texas Studies is in every grade of school. And in North Dakota, there's a little unit on North Dakota Studies in 4th and 8th grades. And so we've been talking about how do we even partner with Department of Public Education in order to make sure that, I mean, I know we talk about humility as North Dakotans, right? But we want to be able to even change and affect the narrative of the pride that people have. I know that we are proud North Dakotans, but we'll also be really humble about that. And so I think that we can even do a better job of retaining our youth, of building the state's reputation, all those types of things if we're shaking off a little bit of that humility and really taking ownership of the pride and the amazing things we have in North Dakota.
Mr. Chairman, one quick question. So the state had an ROI metrics out there that every dollar spent. Does the city of Minot have that same?
We don't. I mean, no, we don't use those same, the state pays a fair amount of money for that data, and we haven't invested in that. I mean, what do we spend in advertising? You know, advertising has shifted a lot, particularly in state. Where we spend our money is in content creation, because that's what works. So, for us. So, I mean, we spent our advertising budget is, and that includes website and a lot of other things, is $140,000 a year. Because you know what, it doesn't have to be a lot for us anymore. I was the ad agency when it used to be $400,000 a year. I wouldn't stand by that kind of a budget. I would never stand with that kind of a budget today, because you don't have to. We're able to use our email marketing. During the time during COVID, we took our time to build our email marketing channels, our social media and all that kind of stuff, and we monitor it daily all the time, and it's growing, and it doesn't have to cost money to be able to do it well.
That's great. Do you have a number of visitors? Is there any way to track that, the number of visitors that come to Minot? Or?
Well, sort of, but honestly, I wouldn't stand by that number. Because it's here, I mean, it's tracking phones and all that kind of stuff, but I wouldn't stand by that total number because it's an algorithm. And there's other ways to trust that data. I wouldn't do that.
Do you have an annual report that you
Yeah. We have an annual report. We do it every April or after we get our tax return from Brady Marks or whatever, that's when we file ours, yeah.
The financial annual report. I didn't know if you had like an annual report that, I think you had, was that at Minot State, you had your year end?
Oh, you mean that State of the City?
Yes, State of the City. Didn't you present?
I presented there some stuff. It wasn't, I mean, yeah, probably was some annual report stuff.
We have an email that goes out as far as like what's going on in Minot.
Yeah.
There's a Minot updates, that might be something that you're.
Yeah, and we send out our B2B all the time too, and you should be probably on that, I would think, if you're not on that. I'll be adding you.
Sounds good.
That's sort of my question, the B2B list. So
Yeah.
did you feel like that event that you had was well attended? Is it gonna be an annual kind of event? Do you think that businesses are aware of it, or is that?
That one was intentional. We invited our stakeholders and partners and the people, the downtown group and the, community leaders and things like that. Yeah, it was well attended as well. It was exactly what we expected, and the people who went, we had very positive reviews on for that. We're absolutely willing to do more. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. You bet we are.
And then trying to figure the question correctly, so we have the two marketing events in the state. So using those attendance numbers, is that something that you're able to leverage at all, or are you doing any additional data collection around those timeframes?
Second favorite question of the day. Thank you, Beth.
Yeah.
So this is what we do to make sure, because we pay money for this.
Yeah.
And so, and they said at our February meeting that Minot is their most analytical / critical client of theirs that second guesses their data all the time. And so what I do is I take the state fair database and I correlate it to what they tell me happened. And then we know how accurate it is.
Right.
And it's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
There's no way I can tell you this today, there is no way I would stand by this data if I hadn't checked it myself.
Right.
I would never sit in this room and talk about it.
Totally. And then those events too, I'm thinking about how we look at that, those events, and especially for our region, the shopping hub that Minot is for those small communities
Yep.
to the west, so, yeah, it's just interesting.
So let me, I'd like to answer, or just talk to this real quickly, is that, you know, when we segment our market, we segment Western North, and it's not just Western North Dakota, that's not fair. A lot of Western North Dakota, but it's also Botnos and Rugby's and whatever, it's the people who, so one of our segments are the people who come here for day trips. And theoretically, Visit Minot's not supposed to care about them because we are funded by bed tax.
Yeah.
But you know what, feet in the street, just as important as heads in beds to Visit Minot. And so that, we've had a shift, a pivot on that. We count feet in the street, and so we market to Western North, we market to the people that live between 60 and 120 miles away that come here for the day and spend a whole lot of money.
Right, and I'm sort of speaking from experience as a Ray kid that we had to come here to get basketball shoes because there wasn't another place to go. So just thinking about, and I know that Heads and Beds has always been since very long ago when I was thinking about Heads and Beds as well. Hard to really figure that out with the Western communities. Yeah.
We had a fair amount of resistance to our organization when we shifted from Heads and Beds to Feet in the Street.
Yeah.
And we're not shifting as if we're abandoning that. We're funded by Heads and Beds. So it would be silly to abandon that completely.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, also standing on top of the mountaintop and say, hey, come stay in our Holiday Inn Express. We have a great one. You want to stay in the Holiday Inn Express? It's a great hotel. It's my hotel of choice. That isn't my point. That isn't what's going to get people here. That isn't what's going to move the needle.
Yeah.
And so to look at it from Heads and Beds is a very narrow-minded way of looking at it, in my opinion. And so we've shifted to Heads and Beds and Feet in the Street. And I think that's what's made the biggest difference for us.
Paul, did you have something?
No, just that point, I think most of my questions got answered, but again, just to that point, talking about being a rate kid and having to come to Minot for, I mean, how do we compete with the Lewiston's, even the people that we're ahead of as far as amenities, how do we compete with them so that we don't lose that? How do we get a Costco or a Sam's Club so that instead of them going to Bismarck, they're coming here, instead of staying in Williston, they're still coming here. We even have that with their airport, I would imagine, to some level, we'll lose that traffic that will fly out of Minot, and will come and stay a night ahead of a flight or whatnot. Just some thoughts, and nobody's to speak to that, but most of my questions got touched.
Because we're that shoes store.
I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much. Just in the interest of time, we'll move on to Bank North Dakota and go through that.
May I stay in my spot, or would you like me to come over there?
For as far as hockey, you're absolutely fine. If you have something you need to get on the screen, we could do that. But
Well, I emailed it to Michaela.
okay.
Yeah.
Here, so if we can do the switch, that'd be
Okay.
Oh, you need to
Yeah,
do.
can we plug her in? Take you.
I cannot plug mine in. I cannot.
Do you have a C?
She's in the
Next
Pardon?
one.
USB-C.
If they would happen to be up.
Flash drive that you can transfer
no.
to, or?
No,
They're not gonna be allowed to do that either.
oh,
Bankers don't.
no.
That's,
Jen, could you check her,
Can you check and see?
her tabs on the
Yeah.
screen? Michaela wasn't open.
She took her computer with her.
I think it's.
It's logged in, it's a one log.
I emailed it to her. Inbox.
Yeah.
There I am. There I am, down there.
Yeah, just trying to do
Right there.
Get a hold of it.
Okay, there's a lot of communities, and we know from the economic research that the daily spend on average for visitors is $130 a day. And so there are communities who go, like, hey, if I'm looking at the state service numbers and these people are from, and then apply that $130 per day average, and then use that as like a impact
Thank you, Jen.
Yep, that's it. That's it.
I'm
Okay.
curious if there's anything else any other communities are doing that might should be interested in. Is there programs from the Department of Commerce or anything like that?
Or Minot is doing
I
everything.
figured,
Yeah.
I assumed.
Everything that we can partner with.
Okay, we'll turn it over to Jackie and
like Jordan with People State or the credit union that Tyler is with, we cater to the banks. We do very little direct lending. We partner with the banks with our various programs. And so, whoops. Okay, so this is kind of our economic development roadmap. So, and what it's gonna kind of discuss is, with B&D and the fact that we do not market to businesses directly, we're gonna go, we market and partner with local banks and credit unions. So, and to help them with their requests from their customers, we have various programs. And so like if we were to talk about like a person that's just starting out, new businesses trying to create, you know, a bank can use what we have as, it would be similar to an SBA guaranteed loan with the beginning entrepreneur. And in that program, we don't ask the community for anything. This is a guarantee that we have with the local financial institution if they meet the parameters of that BAG program. If they don't meet the BAG program, we have something called the Business Development Program. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on these programs with the next slide, but I just kind of want to show you how we go. And then if you go down to which is where we ask for the community participation is in that PACE and FlexPACE program. That's where we ask the community for their support in providing that buy down. So if I'm gonna go down and like I said, this is the startup. And you know, it's our version, Bank of North Dakota's version of an SBA guaranteed loan. And if there's any questions on any of these next two slides, please feel free, but I'm not really going to spend a lot of time on these programs. I think what really the committee would kind of, where your tax dollars are going to go is in with this PACE program or the FlexPACE program. And to explain that is, and as you can see when I showed you that economic roadmap, when we get into these programs, the PACE and the FlexPACE program, we are talking, it's not a startup. We're gonna be in a secured position. These are businesses that are expanding. Very common request would be is business started, rented space because they had limited startup capital. Then as they have grown, they wanna buy a building. That's where the bank's gonna contact Bank of North Dakota, the community, and say, can we do FlexPACE? Or PACE is a program where you have to be a primary sector business. But in these programs, with community support, for every $35 the community will put towards an interest buy down, Bank of North Dakota is going to put in $65. Almost a 2-to-1 to get that borrower's interest rate lower. And the reason for that is, you know, businesses when they first start out has unexpected costs. And that's the reason for this program. And we have, because of the workforce shortage, we don't look as much to the amount of the buy down in the job creation column as you see up here. We look at it now in investments. Unfortunately, because of the workforce issues, we've actually even financed in the PACE program automation to replace people. There are just some jobs that businesses can't fill, so you need automation for them to continue to grow. And we are willing to take a look at that. But this is where we see, and I think, you know, in talking to the financial institutions, both banks and credit unions, you know, this makes a significant difference for some of their customers to be able to grow and provide that economic benefit to the community. And so with the PACE program, you know, the buy down can go up to 500,000, and that 500,000 is what B&D provides. The community, for a $500,000 PACE loan, the community would be asked to provide $269,230. But really, it's a 2-to-1. Bank of North Dakota's by a portion is a full grant. But you're truly, that borrower who's coming forth for that loan, you know, you're providing $269,000, the state's gonna do $500,000 for that buy down. And they really don't understand that, you know, it's not just all the community. So it's a great way for the community to help businesses expand. And Flex PACE is something where you're not primary sector, but the idea is the same, but the maximum is only 200,000. And that level of community support is truly up to what the community wants to support. I'm the Bank of North Dakota representative for the northwest quarter of the state, and every community is a little different in how they see economic development, and what they want to support for economic development. But most communities do see that this is a way for them to leverage a limited amount of funds that they do have for economic development to help grow their communities. And I know I was probably, and there is a additional buy down for affordable housing and childcare, because we do know that those are huge issues here in nearly every community here in North Dakota. But the percentage here in Minot, it's a 65-35 split, is the same for it. The buy down, the maximum buy down is 5% and limited to 5% below prime. But that, I told you I was gonna be cognizant of time. I talk fast, but I'll open it up to any questions that anyone might have.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question. Jackie, out of the major communities across North Dakota, are there any that do not participate in this program? I'm talking.
Everyone participates in the program. As I mentioned, each community may have different businesses that or industries that they want to support over other industries, but they all do participate in this program and all our other programs we have.
Other questions? Jackie, are they, so in our area, this is handled through Service Basin Planning Council. Is that typical of how it's handled around the state? Are municipalities doing it directly with you guys? How is it handled?
It is mostly by an economic development entity. Now, for PACE funding, now that is the MAGIC Fund. The MAGIC Fund does handle that.
Because it's primary sector, right?
Correct.
Yep.
Correct. But yes, there is, in Williston, their entity is the STAR Fund. But ultimately, the funds do come from the city and all of these different entities or the county.
Jackie, Williston is a straight grant, right?
Correct.
Straight grant. Dickinson is borrowed, Minot's borrowed. Is Bismarck borrowed or is it a grant? Do you know?
Bismarck is redesigning their program at this time. It is not a system that's working very well.
Okay.
And it is both, sometimes it is borrowed and other times it is a grant.
So it's quasi, okay. And then Grand Forks and Fargo, do we know, are they loans as well? EDC handles loans or grants? I know it's out of your region.
That is out of my region. I do know that the only thing that Fargo will do buy down for is primary sector, because they have a mentality that this is Fargo and they will come. And I don't mean to be derogatory, but that's really how they feel. And so it is very limited to the amount of support they will provide to something other than primary sector.
Interesting.
And Mr. Chairman, if I will, if I may, to some extent, and I understand Jackie's feeling on that, to some extent, there are two interstates going through your community, and you've you've got a natural revolving door that's happening, you may not need to incentivize these young. And so I can understand that they say, we are who we are. If you want to come here, you know the cost. You know, and I can appreciate that. Most other parts of the country can't say that. You know, there's a reality here that other businesses you're competing for locations. And if we were to say something like, well, we'll just choose not to participate in flex space for the next 5 years, that could have a real strong detriment to who we might be competing.
Well, and I'm sorry to see that tourism has left, but I do think that, you know, if you want to identify a community, it's not the Targets, the Walmarts, the chains, even the Applebee's in a community. It's the locals, you know, your local downtown here, or things that other communities don't have that will drive someone or make somebody remember, oh yeah, that's the place that has this.
Yeah, maybe just add a couple of other comments. I know like Jordan, for example, serves on the Magic Fund screening committee, but for example, if we were to quantify one of the more successful programs, and I would say not slam dunk, but it really kind of is. If a program comes in that's primary sector certified, that the Bank of North Dakota is vetted through, the local financial institutions bought into, and they have that larger investment in, it is kind of one of the best projects that we can bring forward to the City of Mina and the Magic Fund. It really gets, when it's at that point, I'll use an example. I think last 2 weeks ago when we presented, we included the Bank of North Dakota annual report and then provided that to each and every one of you. A great example of that is like AGT Foods, who has invested over $100 million into our community. We at the Chamber of DC have kind of managed that relationship for a long time. We've helped them through those development projects, and now we are sitting on a home of what's going to be a global staple, and it's located in Mina. And so those kind of projects, they don't come around every day, but when we do bring forward a PACE loan and working with the local partners, and we're also very fortunate, I think we've maybe mentioned this, but if we haven't, we're one of the only Chamber Economic Development corporations, I think we might be in the state where we actually have Bank of North Dakota within our 4 walls. And so Jackie is actually, her office is at the Mina Area Chamber of DC. So it's not uncommon for Mark Lyman, who is our economic development specialist, and Jackie to be working through with our financial partners locally. And then even those that do go to the Flex PACE program is the dollars that come from the Magic Fund that then get allocated to Service-Based and Planning Council. And then they're working through that business revolving loan. It's not uncommon for us to be a facilitator or help to guide, hey, your business actually might qualify for a revolving loan program. Service-Based and Planning Council is going to be your partner. But it is that kind of collaborative effort with the financial institutions, the Bank of North Dakota, and then us serving as that liaison to champion and kind of move those pieces through.
So one quick thing that I don't think I caught along the way with FlexSpace is, at what stages of a business's life cycle can FlexSpace be used? I would assume it's startup, but can it be used for expansion? Can it be used for operating? What are the requirements?
Very rarely do we use it in a startup because that's a little bit riskier. And I went back to this economic development roadmap. We want to be secured. So it's we usually see it in an expansion, and it can only be for there. You can use it for core working capital, but most of the time we see it in situations where they're buying a building, adding on to a building, or buying new equipment. Those are situations where we will use FlexPace, not for, and the buy down does not kick in until the borrower starts making principal and interest payments.
So more expansion and scaling up than startup.
Correct.
Other questions?
Just more of a comment, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, this is one of the programs that's more capital intensive for the city. However, it'd be interesting to see from Service-Based and Planning Council, when are these funds going to revolve? We kind of talked about it at the first meeting, but when
that's where my mind goes right now. It all sounds like, I feel like this sounds good, right? Like this is all probably a good path, but I also feel like we're too early to know what some of the ramifications might be when the revolving starts, because that I was a little concerned when we talked last time.
And Mr. Chairman, to that point, on the Magic Fund side, we approved their request for the revolving fund two times now, I believe. That is the question that we ask as well. And, so what you just said, it's too early to know. We don't know if, 92% of the dollars are gonna get collected, and then the future asks are gonna be to cover off that 8% that gets written off or whatever because it doesn't come back, defaults or whatnot. It is hard to get those answers on the local level. That's not the B&D side of it, that's the local match side of it. Yeah, we're kind of in the dark on that too. And
so, from my perspective, as we go through this now, I think this is one of the things we really have to keep in mind, because, city manager, I think, was a big advocate for us putting $1 million into that account this year in our budget, and it passed. I mean, that is what we did. So for 2025, we're adding another $1 million that's going to be available through FlexBase. And so that, it's not just an open spigot. I think we want to see what the results look like, and then what risk are we taking. And if I remember this from last time, we're getting close to when the first ones are coming due. Is that right?
And the biggest thing, yes, we are. The biggest thing to remember with that, for what it's worth, and not advocating either way, but for $1 million of local money put in, we are drawing in like what, 2.86 million from Bank of North Dakota, because it's 65-35. Yep. So if we take that $1 million out, then we lose access to the other. Yep. And that's a government conundrum as old as time. Like, if you take this money away, you lose access to this money. And not gonna go there today. Yeah. But
to be honest with you, Jordan, at some point we all kind of
we're gonna go there,
because that's sort of my point here.
Yes.
Because one of the other things with these programs, and we'll do more of a deep dive on these directly at some point, right? So one of the things that I also get a little bit concerned about with something like FlexBase is, even though we can theoretically say it's available to anyone, right? Like anyone, any business could go down this path if they wanted to expand, if they met the criteria. But at the same time, it's not a place where we're protecting for competition, right? So we're not saying to local businesses, hey, you know what, we're not going to bring in another competitor to you, or we're not going to help your competitor across the street. Now I realize another accounting firm, we own an accounting firm. Another accounting firm, if it was expanded, would have the same access I would, and we all have the same level playing field in that way, right? But at the same time, when we're using public funds, we've got to keep that in mind. We got to make sure that we're leaving that playing field as level as we can.
So I know this doesn't apply to FlexPace, but it applies to regular pace, or at least I think it did, because we haven't had many meetings in the Magic Fund side lately, and we've got new guidelines, and I don't know that we've met under the new guidelines yet to this point. That is one thing we are supposed to consider on pace. The first, not flex pace, regular pace, because the first meeting I ever was on when I got appointed to that committee was for Stevens Welding. And we had a member of the committee at the time that had central machining and pump repair. And that was one of the big questions that came up in our discussions are we propping up a competitor, where this industry is already sitting in town? And Steve, to his credit, he's not here. He kind of just figured he was doing fine as it was, so he didn't really say anything.
So Jackie, can you clarify that? Because we're talking about two things. I want to be clear about what we're saying, though. Does PACE have that requirement? Does PACE itself look at competitive factors around town? Or is that something we would do with our guidelines?
Well, as a credit union or a bank underwrites the credit, they are going to take that into consideration in the approval or the denial of the loan. Right. That's not something that's per se in PACE. It's more in the underwriting of the actual approval of the loan, I would say.
And so what I was getting at, Jordan, I think what you're referring to is in the Magic Fund guidelines, right? So if we were going to go that route and do, and I don't even know.
Which, that's where the local match comes.
So is that all that we're doing on the Magic Fund now? Because that's maybe where I'm missing part of this. Is the Magic Fund focused on PACE?
It's been a heavy, like, aspect of it. Honestly, it's been so long since we've had a meeting.
Well, and that's what I'm getting at. Like, because it's evolved over time.
But the last thing we approved was, well, we had the hot switch heating and then the flex pace allocation for Service Basic Plan Council.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify that a little bit, back up in time before the latest modification of the Magic Fund guidelines, the only projects eligible for Magic Fund dollars were primary sector.
Yes.
So then it is that limitation flows through. So now that those guidelines have been modified to fund the state matching programs and open that up a little bit, there can be some changes with that.
Okay. So Justin,
well, I just going back to the flex pace and the Service Basin Planning Council with can't they project what's going to be revolving?
That was kind of my
good question. I think we would have it all on our roster, right?
Service Basin Planning Council, that's what my ask was for Service Basin Planning Council.
Yeah.
What is the maturity of these, and when will we get our first $1 million back? And when will this fund truly evolve? That in fact, in the 27 budget, we won't have to feed $1 million into this thing. That was more money.
Well, and I think as a long-term thing, that'll be a question for council always. I mean, if this is one of our primary ways that we do this, we may want to always be adding to that fund. Both to offset what we might be losing if that's still worth it. But there's a lot of discussion, right? And I think that's where we'll have some feedback in that. So just in the interest of time, I want to cut off here. I've been fooled twice, so we're going to start next time with the topic I actually want to get to here, which is fine. This is great because this is the background that we don't need. But I'll hand these out to you guys. This was meant to just be a little piece that we could use. And what this is, if you look at it, it's just got what from some of the presentations, what some of the types of goals we can think about having. What are we trying to drive? One of the things that Harold has thrown out is a great thing to think about economic development wise is disposable income, right? If we can drive disposable income in the community, it should do a ton of things for us all the way around. Yes,
There's some extras.
Oh, there's a few more coming. So that's one thing that we can look at. There's other ways that we can do it. Raising the tax base. If you look quickly on the back of that, that's just I just asked ChatGPT, what should the goals of an economic development program be? And that's what it spit out. It's not meant to be, hey, this is our list. But as we take this up, we heard a lot of stuff here. I was talking with tourism there about, can we turn a one-time tourist all the way into a resident of our city, right? That would be far-fetched. But at the same time, is that the goal right now? Is that what we're actually trying to do? Are we trying to drive population? Are we trying to drive wage? Because wage is being driven by a lack of workforce, right? What are we actually trying to do? Because I want to be able to tell that resident of our city the question that we always get all the time. What do we do with those dollars, right? We're spending the public's dollars to do this stuff. Everything we talked about, very little of it today was Minot-centric. It was all state dollars, mostly authorized by the legislature. Virtually all of what Commerce does is supplied by the legislature. That's not something we're driving other than talking to our legislators. But when we're thinking about Minot and we're spending the money that we are in these different directions, what bang for the buck are we giving to the people? And what is that actual goal? Is it increased tax base? Because increasing the tax base would be great if it drove our taxes down, right? I mean, I think we'd all love that. But in my perspective, I don't think that's happened with the tax base driving we've been doing. Taxes are higher than ever. So that's what we got to be thinking of, okay? And so I don't want to go a lot further today, just with time where it's at. But we will hit this, and I'll put it at the beginning of the agenda next time. So we'll do it first. And then what we'll do with the rest of that time, we've got Harold teed up. Harold did a presentation A few years ago, on council, Paul, you were there, it was at the old chamber, and I watched it. He's gonna refresh that, I believe, Brian, I think you guys are working on something there. And so we're gonna get sort of a city perspective now. So Brecca's given us, partnership we have with them, but we're gonna get the city side of the remaining pieces. And then once we're done with that session, then we're gonna start going into program by program by program. And we're gonna start going through, because again, at the end, I would love to bring the council a set of, hey, here's 8 recommendations that the committee has for how to enhance or adjust our programs. And then the council will pick them up and we'll talk through it and see where we're at. Okay, does that sound good?
Just respond to that.
Yeah.
And I think, Mike, I think you're absolutely right. Again, I think that question and all those examples you gave as far as what is economic development, I think anything that you named in there is right.
Yeah, it can be.
It's what lends to your community? What is your community in need of at that point in time, at that juncture? What is the federal level politics, environment, climate? What is the state level? What is the state economy doing? What is your local economy doing? I agree with you 100%. I think Katie hit on the head. It's taking a holistic approach to it. It's not always going to be this 1 + 1 is 2. It's A + B = Q. Like
Yeah.
it's a non-defined thing. And as much as we can define it, I love it when we have the metrics at $1 = $34 in return. That's great. And I think if we're chasing as a community that we're going to be able to quantify all of this data and all of these projects, I'll be honest with you, I think we're wasting our time at that point. But
again, where we can.
Yep,
It makes sense.
absolutely.
And just, one other thing that I think you said, Paul, maybe it was at a retreat, that stuck with me a little bit. And I just want to use it as something to illustrate another way of thinking of this. It doesn't have to be jargon stuff, right? Oh, raise the tax base. It doesn't have to be that. Like I remember you saying, hey, I remember being in Minot when it was Applebee's, right? That was the restaurant that we had in Minot. And it's not that today, right? So I think there's an intrinsic thing that goes along with that says, as we grow, as population grows, as things happen, we have more amenities and more things. And that is as good of a reason to do some of this stuff as, we can lower taxes. Now, you guys have all maybe gotten to know me a little bit on council and see where my mind generally is. And I told you at the beginning, I'm skeptical of all of this. At the same time, I want you all to know that's okay. Like those types of sort of intangible benefits are all a part of this, right? That's part of what makes it a great place to live. And it means that all of our businesses can thrive and do the things that they need to do. So I would ask you to have that kind of stuff in mind also as we go into this discussion next time. And I think we'll do this a couple times throughout. It's not just now, because as we get to the end and we go, hey, we got some recommendations. Wait, does this still fit with what we thought was the goal here? Hopefully it does. Jordan? Yeah.
Well, the only thing I was going to add to that, and it's something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, is, coming up with the definition, and that's great, but economic development, what people are hoping to get out of the taxpayer monies that are being spent on it in this area means very different things to very different people. As a banker, FlexPace, I can see the importance to it. My next door neighbor who's retired Navy and works at Home Depot, he doesn't see the importance to it.
Yep.
So we've seen all of these presentations so far. Sometimes I think there's a disconnect between all this effort and time and resources that are being expended on these things and what the public is seeing as the success and the failures of economic development in Minot, and how do we bridge that gap?
Right, and how much of it, to put on the other hat, how much of it came because of programs versus what was naturally happening in the market? And back to Paul's point, I don't think we'll have a good handle on it. We won't. So the question really just becomes, I also, Jordan, though, I don't want it to fall to just being our answer being, hey, we got to tell them better. We got to have better communication, because it truly is about results, right? It's about what are we actually driving here. Paul?
I think, and Jen can probably speak to this a little bit in the marketing world. The best kind of growth you have is that organic growth, is that true engagement when people are engaging with your social media. There is a time to bolster that with investment, whether it's buying likes or buying engagement. I'm talking in the marketing sense, but we're all after that organic growth, and I think that's the goal. Is that we want to see Prairie Sky Breads and these Broadway Bean and Bagels that pop up and compete with an Applebee's. But where does the city and then those tax dollars bridge that gap to make that more make it a better environment for those things to come. And that to me is that I'm after organic growth. What is the appropriate level of investment, you know, to get us over that tipping point to help make some of those things come to fruition?
And maybe that is the question is, because as a committee, I mean, we're hearing about all the work that's going on that goes on, and it's not only city dollars, right, that's going towards that. So then it's our question as we're looking at this whole holistic view, but we're also kind of reporting back on what the city would like to invest or on what the city is doing.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
is next week, are we going to go over kind of what the city, I mean, I watched the budget hearings, but what dollars are going where, and then our recommendations would be if we feel like that investment is correct, or.
Yeah, and I think, and that again, and Brian, I think you guys have started talking about what you'll present next time. So we will hear, what we'll hear is the city's, mainly the city's perspective on some of the stuff that's separate, because some of it is truly local. You know, when wayfinding and facade and things like that are truly local.
Yeah.
Right, so we're definitely gonna hear those sides. But Harold's got some perspective based on his position in the world and the things that he's done on what this should do and what should be Minot-centric. But I think what we need to be focused on in the end is, back to what Paul was saying, where are there places where we want to do these investments, and what level should they be at? You know, again, this year we've got $1 million going into supporting FlexBase. I mean, that's pretty much what those dollars are doing.
Right.
We've got another what is it? Maybe 350 going into city-centric programs, if I remember right, something along those lines. And that one can go up to 800,000. So when we look at the bucketing structure we have within the Magic Fund world, that's also there. And I think that's where recommendations come in. Now, again, I don't want you to take that hey, we're just going to go rewrite the Magic Fund guidelines again. I don't expect that. I mean, at the same time, if as a committee we go, well, wait a second, like Jordan said, that's not where the energy is right now. We're not getting requests for it, and there's what, $8.5 million, something like that, sitting in that account. I mean, that, you know, so we have to think about that. Yeah, and then we've got other stuff we're going to get. We'll look at tips. We'll look at Renaissance loans that are not necessarily dollars from sales tax going in, but we're foregoing property tax dollars when we sign up for those programs. And so we want to think our way through those as well, which is a different thing. Yeah.
I'd just like to say too, this is maybe just a different perspective because I've recently been through the process of opening a business in town. So like maybe looking at that too, maybe we need to invest some of those dollars into the way that the city handles that process because that's a big complaint amongst a lot of business owners. So like we want to see Prairie Sky Breads and all these little places pop up in really unique avenues. Like maybe ensuring the process working with the city is a little bit smoother. Because that's definitely something that we hear all the time, like how that goes.
Just is that what, again, I agree with you, because I hear it even in the development side. Do you hear it from the development side, like the building, like the construction side, or is it the?
Yeah, so there's like the DRT meeting, maybe like, this was something I had even mentioned to Luke at the end of it, you know, he said, some of the things feedback I was hearing too is that maybe they were understaffed and not able to keep up with everything. So maybe there needs to be some staffing changes for them. To make sure that they're able to give the information they need to these businesses so that we're not falling down on the end of it. So like things that are happening is like, oh yeah, go ahead and pursue the project, and at the very end they're like, oh no, we have to change all of this stuff. Like maybe we could front load that information, have like an on-site meeting or something, just maybe change that approach to make it not so daunting for these new business owners too. Like that's something else to do. We need to invest in having another architect in that board, something along those lines.
And you know, that brings to mind things like what the governor had championed, which is red tape reform and just doing all the things that we can. You know, nobody's saying that we are going to allow anything not safe to happen. I mean, that's a given. The question is the question is what's the path from A to Z, right? How do you get there along the way and making sure that works as well as we can. So, okay, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. So
Sorry, one more, but Brian and I were talking this week about the Minot 2040 comprehensive plan. Okay. So if you're not familiar with that, that was 18 months of public community work. We happened to sit on that steering committee. I think others in the room did too. And there's a whole chapter on economic development that includes multiple layers of goals. They're not just necessarily city specific, but they're broader than that. So I would encourage everyone, if you need to, it's right off of Brian's website, right off of Community and Economic Development. There's a link to the Minot 2040 plan.
form, so they will put it up there in the next 10 minutes. And you can go look at that plan, it's chapter 1, talks about goals and objectives. And then I think chapter, I can't remember the exact chapter, but it's clearly laid out there, which was economic development. There's a lot of good information in there that I think would be insightful.
And that was, sorry, from past role, that process was collecting citizen and business and data from the people who live here. It was a very long effort to collect that data. So it is maybe that reflection of what the citizens would like that would be difficult to fit into 2-hour meeting here. So that would be a good resource to take a look at.
Okay, all right, well, thanks. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
This is one of the first